Recovery is stupendous.
Achievable.
Hope.
Freedom.
Empowering.
It's unique to everyone.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Getting a new lease on life.
It's finding restoration after you fall down.
Recovery is having the freedom to enjoy life.
For me, it was finding a way to really love myself.
My recovery is possible in part because of my own sense of purpose.
Welcome to Montana's Peer Network Recovery Talks podcast. I'm Jim Haney, and I want to welcome the listeners to another episode where we're talking about the 10 guiding principles of recovery. And today, I'm going to be here with my two guests, and we're talking about the role that culture plays in recovery. So, introduce yourselves.
My name is Bill Devel, recovery coach with Montana's Peer Network.
And I'm Ashley McLean, the recovery coach supervisor for Montana's Peer Network.
And so if you have been listening to the past podcasts, depending on sort of what order you're going in, we're going through the 10 guiding principles of recovery, SAMHSA's 10 guiding principles. And we're just working our way through and, we're just sharing our thoughts and feelings about it, our experiences, and hopefully you as the listener get something out of it. And today we're going to talk about culture.
Yeah. We were kind of talking before this podcast about, the traditional idea of culture, right? And I think it goes to like ethnicity and that kind of thing, but it is so much bigger than that. Like it's so much bigger than that. And I think it starts for each individual young, right?
Yeah.
We're raised in this culture of our family, right?
Right. Your family, your partner, if you get married, you have
Yep.
kids, you have your new family, right? You have your more immediate family, but you have your bigger family. Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that, for a lot of people, I think when you say culture, they think about ethnicity, that it's only about ethnicity, but we're talking about cultures, subcultures, which can include, hobbies, your extracurricular stuff.
So many things.
Social media.
Family dynamics.
Dynamics for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much more to it. You might be involved in different groups. And when you're unhealthy, if you are involved with groups, they're probably unhealthy groups.
Yes.
Like
absolutely.
It's like the birds of a feather thing,
flock together,
right?
Yes.
So whatever it is you're doing, if you're really unhealthy, you're probably around, if you're going to the bar culture, there's one.
Oh, right? The bar culture.
People who go to bars or clubs, there's a whole culture there and there's a whole thing to that. Yeah, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the recovery side, but that's an example of you might be a part of a culture and you might not realize that that's even what it is. And I know in the PS 101 class, I always share this, if you're not sure, just think about whatever it is. So does it have its own lingo? Do people who aren't a part of that culture, would they understand a conversation taking place?
Right. So if I said, keep it simple, stupid, to somebody walking down the street, they probably are not going to get that reference.
They're like, why'd you call me stupid?
Why'd you call me stupid?
Right.
And in my culture, people who are also involved in my culture, if I say that, they absolutely know what I'm talking
means.
about.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think for the listener to sort of adjust the lens so they understand we're not talking about ethnicity.
No.
Talking about all these other cultures that we're a part of. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always am not amazed but surprised sometimes about how these 10 guiding principles intermix with one another. Mm-hmm. And if we think about culture and subcultures, it's no surprise that there's many pathways to recovery based on just culture itself.
Yeah.
And so, it's just kind of neat to think about how some of these intermingle and kind of start to make more sense than pigeonholing someone into a certain type of recovery or assuming that they're in one type of culture or whatever, and being able to be open and allow that person's culture to come out, and be able to support them the best way that you can.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think about the peers and allies one. So allies can be found in subcultures.
Absolutely.
You know, if they're healthy, if the group is, you know, healthy, right? I mean, you can get involved with a yoga group or a running group.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and there are people who are already into being healthy.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And it's not recovery per se, but it's health and wellness.
And it's promoting your own personal recovery,
Yeah.
right? By getting involved in those kind of different subcultures. Like I remember volunteering for Our Lady of the Rockies in Butte, right? And
you did?
Yeah, and the culture was a lot older than me, but I adapted to their culture, and it also helped promote my own personal recovery, right? Because I'm doing something that is positive and being of service and volunteering my time, and it was a cool culture. I go back every year and make pasties with those women.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's great.
Potato cutting and onion
Yeah.
cutting and all sorts of stuff.
pretty
and
cool.
It's its own little deal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other thing that I think about for myself with culture is in my family structure of, you know, when I first got into recovery, I mean, there wasn't this openness about it. There wasn't this openness about having these conversations about having mental health issues or substance use issues, or it didn't exist. And it really alienated me. It made me feel even more separated from the family. But then, you know, as time goes on, you find out, oh, uncle this had this diagnosis, or your cousin over here, you know, but don't
talk about it.
Don't talk about that, you know, where it's like, well, why didn't you tell me? Like, that would have been good information to know, like, one, from a genetic standpoint, but also to be able to connect with the person, that maybe you have another person in your family who's in recovery or has had similar experiences, but that was not the way my family. There was a lot of denial. And so that's a whole nother, that's the culture within my family dynamics, was not very supported, and I didn't feel welcomed and, you know, encouraged to be on that sort of pathway.
Pursue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good. That's a good word, right?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, in my own personal family culture that we, like, I'm the one that broke the cycle, right? But like, when I think about it, I'm really not the one that broke the cycle. Like, my dad broke the cycle of that family's culture of sickness, right? We had a culture of sickness in our family, and my dad for our side kind of broke that. And like, so me growing up, my family culture was not one of my parents like drinking socially. Like, I never saw that kind of thing happening when I was a kid. And so when I went on and I explored my own subcultures in a non-recovery world, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm betraying my family. But, you know, I think about it like, oh, I'm going to break the cycle with my daughter. And it's like, no, I'm just getting back to my roots, right? I'm getting back to my family's culture of like, this is how I was taught, you know, and I lost sight of that. But my daughter has that same thing right now, is she doesn't know what it's like to see her parents party or go out drinking, not be able to drive, or, you know, those kind of things.
Part of her life.
It's not part of her life. Yeah. And so when she sees that with other people, it's kind of like shock and awe for her.
I bet.
Right? Yeah.
I think it's really important. I think each person, you know, in their own recovery, you know, when you're ready, I think you have to examine your culture, because there's also that social part too.
Yep.
And your friends and the people you hang around.
Absolutely.
And that, you know, that was a big one, like letting go of that culture of on the weekends going to a party or a bar, or, you know what I mean? And there was always drinking. That was always part of it.
Yeah.
And you know, and you try to hang on to that because you're part of this culture. You're accepted, you know, right? And I think every person really does. I had to do it, and I think it's healthy to look at it to say, is this subculture I'm a part of actually benefiting me in my new recovery life? You know,
there's another thing about culture that I've had a vision towards, and that is changing a culture, meaning that, you know, it'd be my vision for the community that I lived in, for someone notices someone in the family starting to deal with some sort of mental condition that's beyond their scope.
Right.
And instead of sweeping it under the carpet, they're automatically drawn to the individual and know where this person needs to go to get help. Same with substance abuse. We don't, Aunt Martha, she can't come to the family reunion. She's going to make a scene.
Right.
We're just going to not invite her
Right.
and not let her know about it. No, instead, Aunt Martha needs some help.
Yeah.
There's 3 treatment centers.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get her some outpatient.
Yeah.
Let's come together as a family and support this individual. And it just doesn't have to happen at the family. It needs to happen at, like you were saying, you know, with when we were talking previously about the friend. That knew that and instead of not saying anything, they're like, you know, they have that tough conversation and they say, look, I'm noticing some things that are unhealthy and you're headed down a road that's destructive. We need to address this. And have that open culture of acceptance of where people are at and get them the help they need pre their life totally falling apart or jails and institutions are involved. You know?
I think like we can shape our culture. That's kind of what I hear you saying is like just like shaping the culture within our own lives. You know what I mean? We don't have to fall into these status quos of what culture we come from or how this is supposed to be. Like it makes me think about like now that I'm in recovery, like when I wasn't in recovery, like I didn't live, like I existed and I isolated and I just was by myself and alone. And now that I'm in recovery, like I found this culture of concerts, right? Like I love to go to concerts and my life and concert life sometimes are at odds with each other, right?
Because that's a place where typically lots of drinking, drugs.
And they're at odds. And so like I get to shape my own culture of sober concert going, you know what I mean? Like that is so much fun and we enjoy ourselves and we're louder than the drunk people and like so you know, I get to shape that, and it doesn't mean that because I'm in recovery, I can't experience these other cultures that maybe early recovery would have been triggering, but where I'm at in my recovery today aren't.
That's great.
Right?
That's like weddings.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a culture of drinking at weddings, funerals, right? Everybody just, it's all about drinking. I remember early in recovery, I had a really hard time going to weddings, and that was very, very challenging for me. And it didn't make me want to drink. It was, I couldn't stand the behavior.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand the people getting so intoxicated. We haven't even eaten dinner yet, you know? And I'm thinking, you know, and now, you know, 20 years later, I can go and I'm better, but I know I don't need to stay late or, you know, right? There's a time when things sort of shift a little bit, right? And, so it's like, okay, it's time to go. But I also notice I don't have people in my life who get married who have those kinds of weddings anymore either. So that's the other shift that's happened. The people I do know, if there is drinking, it's minimal. It's responsible. It's you know, not, hey, we're having the reception so we can all get blasted, you know, right? Like, So I think that's a huge part of it. And all of that is really part of the culture conversation, because in recovery, it's led me to be a part of like the hiking community, like being a part of hiking. And that's one that's not traditionally associated with substance use or, right? Like, and so it's cool because recovery's given me that. It's allowed me to be a part of something totally different, you know, that has nothing to do with substances or
yeah.
Connecting with nature. And so, I mean, I again, I really encourage people to examine that for themselves, their own internal culture. And man, there's so many good things when you're in recovery that you get to be a part of. I think I wouldn't be a part of if I wasn't.
I agree.
We miss out on a lot when we don't examine some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think it all comes down to like one of those basic principles of recovery is just having an open mind, right? To all of these different things. And like, it's your choice and your voice and what works for you, right?
Yeah. And the societal thing, I mean, I heard that in both, what both of you were sort of sharing. I mean, there's a societal part, and Bill, you were kind of honing in on that, like changing that societal way we approach mental health issues and embracing it. And, and it brings me back to if you said you had cancer, how does a person treat you versus you say, I have
schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the reactions are completely different in most people.
Yeah.
In most people. I mean, if you're a peer supporter, it's different, but the average person, you're probably getting a hug.
Yeah.
For cancer.
Yeah. I know I just got back from a vacation, and one of my friends, and he's a black man, and he and I were having a conversation, and I broadcast the culture of recovery in my life. Like, anybody who knows me knows that about me.
Yeah, you're very open about it.
I'm very open about that culture in my life. And so he came to me and he's like, I just recently got put on anxiety medicine, and I don't feel like I have anybody that I could talk to about it, because in Black culture, and a man on top of that, you don't talk about that kind of stuff, right? You don't talk about anxiety. You man up. You pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And, and it's like, that is something that I think we do need to change, is being able to talk about it, no matter what race, creed, religion, sex, whatever it is that you are, that, when you're struggling, that you have somebody that you can talk to, and there's no shame associated with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've met my share of, and I don't know if it's, just as you get older, I mean, I don't know, but, there's a lot of guys, I think, macho kind of guys, like the Montana kind of thing with, hunting, and I drive a truck, and, like, I don't have any mental health issues, but, you spend some time with them and visiting, and you're like, you're thinking, there might be something there, and and so my approach is a little different. I guess I'm not as open as you until the conversation comes around to it. Yeah. So it usually happens through, like, what do you do for a living?
Yep.
Right. So you sort of tell them, and then if they're open to it, you'll know, because they'll start asking you more questions.
Right. Yeah.
If they're not, it gets shut down, right, Bill? Like, like the conversation sort of ends right there.
Not gonna look at that.
Yeah. So if they are open to it, then I take advantage of that and try to, talk about it and I am open about it then. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and it's just being a guy and that whole the hunting, fishing culture. A lot of that revolves around alcohol. I mean, today I'm super comfortable, so I can say I'm in recovery, or right. And I'm okay if somebody's drinking, or
I keep on thinking about trying to make a cultural change, and it takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
like
a generation
at
of
least
time,
at least
where we talk about it now, and then our kids talk about it, and then maybe even our kids get to deal with it and actually implement it because they see it, and then but it just doesn't it just doesn't happen overnight,
right?
And that's why I think peer support is so relevant to recovery, because we are people with lived experience that you spot it, you got it,
Yeah.
type deal, where we can have empathy and sympathy and actually make a difference if the person's willing to move forward.
For sure.
Absolutely.
I think back when I first got in recovery in the 90s, you didn't see anything on television, movies. There was nothing about recovery. And today, like, vast majority of television shows have someone in recovery. Movies,
Yep.
people with a mental health diagnosis. I mean, it's pretty common. I mean, there definitely has been a shift. I would say I agree with what you're saying, although I think it takes even longer. I think it's more than one generation. I think it actually is like 2 generations. Because I think back, I mean, I've been in recovery 20 some years. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, it was, and I remember the first time I heard, it was on television show Blue Bloods.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that show.
And
Yeah.
and they were looking for somebody. It was, had a substance use issue, and hey, we can go down to the center and talk to his peer supporter. And I about fell off the couch, I went, oh my gosh, and they went to the center and they talked to the peer supporter, like, now there'd be some HIPAA violations with that, right? But, for the show, for them to work that into the show, to make that mainstream, wow, it was like, whoa, like, that's really, talk about progress, like,
Well, I think, in light of our world and the cultural shift that's happening within our world right now, like I heard something the other night, and it was about, just like the culture of police, right? You have this culture of police, and there is a whole culture of that life, right? And there was this person's opinion, right? But I share in this opinion that to make that more effective, and we need to have more supportive roles, right? And it was like this national platform saying we need to basically have peer supporters, right? And I thought that was cool, because that's a huge cultural shift. It's going to take time. It's going to take time.
For sure. I mean, that's something, Montana's Peer Network, I mean, we've been promoting this for a while through pilot projects and going into communities and getting peer supporters out in the community, working with people, showing that's effective. And that's a great point. I mean, that's a whole nother cultural shift. And the policing and how we view these things. And, I've never, I've never understood the approach to mental health, the way society has sort of put it on the backs of law enforcement, when we don't view other ailments the same way. I mean, we call an EMT.
Right.
We call 911 and they send an ambulance.
Yeah.
You're having a medical issue. If I'm in psychosis and I'm talking to myself on a street corner, why does that fall under criminal activity instead of health, right? Like, and I know we're maybe slipping a little bit out of the cultural thing, but this is the point being, there is a stir that is happening right now that we, MPN, I mean, we've been promoting this for a long time, but there is a stir that's sort of happening at a bigger level to say, wait, we do need to address this a little bit. And I know there's some efforts here in Montana to tie in EMTs and peer support work, which always has made more sense to me. I've never really understood the law enforcement piece. It's like they're the default or something. It's like,
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, we are the advocates. We are the people in recovery who need to move that cultural shift forward.
Yeah. And we need mainstream society to move, because that's what's really going to move the needle. That's what's going to make the generational shift. It's not just us in recovery, because we've been saying it for a long time.
Yes.
Right.
And I think it kind of goes to your point of, we were quiet about it for so long, right? As a whole, we were quiet about it, and now we're coming out of the shadows, and we're saying we're not going to be quiet about it anymore.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
proud to be a person in recovery. And I don't care how you look at me because this is who I am, you know?
Yeah. You and I have talked about that many times, and I share that in class a lot of times. We get on that conversation of the recovery community, the culture of recovery for many, many decades was in the shadows. And I share this story about the first AA meeting that I went to was down an alley in the back of the building, right? So, you have a storefront in the front, but then it's in the back. Okay, so as a kid growing up in the city, my grandparents taught me, you don't walk down alleys, Jimmy. You don't go down there. There's danger down the alley. Yeah. But now I'm supposed to go there for help. I'm supposed to walk down this dark alley into some, doorway, some dingy doorway, for help. And it's against what you've been, right? But now, today, you look at MPN. I mean, our office, we have big glass windows. We're almost on Main Street. We're one store from Main Street. We're front and center. And I know there's a lot of other recovery organizations. And that's part of that shift that's been happening for a long time, where it's much more acceptable. You walk past our door, and we always have literature in the window about mental health, substance use, trauma, suicide prevention, those kinds of things. And people stop and read it. It's amazing how many people will stop and read the literature. And that's part of that shift.
Yep.
I don't know that 20 years ago, MPN could have an office here 1 block off Main Street. I don't know if it would have been allowed. I think somebody might have come by and said, you can't be here.
You're going to drive business away or something.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want people like that here or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that might have happened.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful about the cultural shifts that are happening personally and societally and all that stuff. Like, I'm really hopeful about it. I know a lot of companies are also now recognizing the culture of people who struggle or who suffer, right? And allowing a culture of wellness within the workplace also. So that's something that is really promising.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been a really great conversation about culture and the role that it plays in recovery. I think it's good, and it's so dynamic. I think when I think about all of the guiding principles, this is one that's like got many, many layers to it, right? Because we're all a part of so many different cultures, and so good conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And the listener, please tune back in as we make our way through the 10 guiding principles.
Thank you. Bye.
See you next time.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works. Recovery is possible.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.
Recovery works and recovery is possible.